Welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I'm Richard Dugan, your host. Thanks so much for joining us here on this program that brings you new paradigms for a new world. We're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We are here Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m. We have a 9 a.m. broadcast on Wednesdays. And then for the month of December, we're going to be here 5 days a week, Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m. So I hope you'll join us for these very special programs throughout the month of December. We are streaming live at all of these times at richarddugan.com. We podcast all of our programs, all of these conversations on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, a whole lot of different places across the width and breadth of this great internet we call the web, which has no beginning nor end, nor any defined boundaries for that matter. We're also on YouTube, where you can watch these conversations. We hope you'll subscribe to either or both the podcasts or videocasts, and at least click notifications so that when a new conversation is placed up on these platforms, you'll be notified so that you can tune in. We ask that if you can support us financially, we would be gratefully appreciative. We have a PayPal account. It is there for your security as well as ours. And the email address they'll ask for that you'll want to put in is richard@richarddugan.com. That's richard@richarddugan.com. We also ask that you take time during the decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, to go within, to spend time in that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place and listen to that still small voice. And I guarantee you today's program, we're going to be talking about that as well with a former educational tutor, I should say, small business owner and part-time freelance news and feature articles writer. Merrie H. Reagan is my guest, resident here in the United States, in Massachusetts. I'm really happy to have you here on the program to talk about your latest work, your memoir. We seem to be doing a lot of interviews with folks who have written their memoirs. I better get with the program. I'm 63 and I haven't written mine yet. Life Flashes, a memoir. Thank you for being with us here today.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to talk with you and to be with everyone, Richard.
It's really interesting to talk with people who have chosen at this time to write their memoirs. My father really wasn't a writer. He lived to be almost 90, almost made it to 92, passed away this past March. And I would have to just put recollections of the memories I have of my experiences with my father in my memoirs, or memoir, I guess you should say. And I chuckle at some folks who actually write their memoirs when they're still in their late 20s or 30s or 40s. And I'm thinking, wait a minute. Usually you have had to have lived a little while, at least into your 50s before. But, I'm okay. You're going to give us volumes 2 and 3 when you get older, I hope. What made you decide to write your memoir?
Well, like you, I've chuckled too at people that, were writing in the memoir in the 20s but also then writing a second and third memoir, because I grew up believing that you write the memoir is the last book you write before you die.
Yeah.
You die, and, but I didn't intend to write a memoir at all. I didn't intend to write a book. I started writing a diary in 2007, and 3 years later, I think this is a book. I'm going to continue on with it until it's finished. Had I known then that it was going to be another 11 years before I finished writing it, I probably would not have completed it. So I'm glad I didn't know that.
Now, you consider yourself a keen observer of life, as do I. I like to preface most of my comments by saying, my observation is, because I don't put any of my philosophy on anybody else. It's mine. You like it or you don't like it, doesn't matter to me. It's mine. I don't tell other people how to live, but I find the paradoxes, the dichotomies that are out there, or what have you, and sometimes they can be ironic. Those are the things that I observe and that I comment on. It's like, you're kidding me. You do not see the forest for the trees? Okay, and it's right there in front of you. Are those some of your observations as you go have gone through your life thus far, that you just kind of marvel at mankind's inability to see what's right in front of them, that just makes more sense than what maybe they have been told over, maybe from their childhood, the beliefs that they've carried with them?
Well, I think people experience life in different ways. I tend to be a person who is uh, internal.
Hmm.
I learn, social versus what do you, I'm lost for words. What do you call a person who is primarily goes in introvert? I'm an introvert. And at times, though I don't particularly care for that, I think we're all a little bit of both. We're all introverted to some extent and extroverted to another. People who are introverts experience life largely through observation and internal stories, whereas people who are extroverts experience life largely through connecting with others in conversation.
Mm.
So, and we're all a little bit of both. I think it's been an interesting. I think it's been a really interesting journey. I think that we all experience life in certain ways, uh, and yet there are universal truths that cannot be compromised. And I think that that's true. There are universal truths that are just, they're true for everybody. It doesn't matter.
Mm. One of the things I find fascinating in that regard is one of the conversations I've had on this program has to do with one's own truth that they believe in, and that everybody has their own truth. And yet, at the same time, as you just said, there are some truths out there, universal, if you will. I'm not sure if the word immutable is quite accurate, but nonetheless, um, I've got a couple that I've come up with, and I don't know whether they're accurate or not, but as far as the universe is concerned, there is always an exchange. I mean, it's just kind of like, what is it? Einstein's, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. That's the same thing. Without a giver, there cannot be a receiver, and vice versa. My father gave me my comeuppance once. Talk about ironies. Sent me some money for something. I can't remember exactly. And I said, "Oh, Dad, you shouldn't have." He says, "Well, of course I shouldn't have. I wanted to. So just, you know, it's his money. He can do with it what he wants." And so from that point forward, anytime my parents ever sent me anything, I would just say, "Thank you. Thank you very much." I would never, "Oh, you shouldn't have." And yet we do that all the time with people who are generous to us, who are very gracious in their abundance and their prosperity in whatever form it takes, even if it's just their time. And they do it just maybe at the spur of the moment, that kind of thing. To me, that's one of those universal laws or truths, if you will. What are some of the ones that you have discovered?
Well, I discovered when I began, about the time that I began writing the book, that without a relationship with God or a transcendent being, you can't no person can truly be successful, no matter how you experience God. And meaning successful, meaning being at peace. And at the time that the book opened, I was very seriously ill, and I was I was near gravely ill, and I went outside one morning, on a January morning. I was very lightly dressed. And I thought, I don't think it can go on much longer this way, being this ill. And at the time, I didn't realize it, but I believe God was talking with me, because all of a sudden I said, no, I don't. And I believe that I was responding to a question that I was being asked. Is this how you want your life to end? And I said, no, I don't. And so then I began talking with God about why I had been ill for so many years, and things I did that I didn't forgive and I didn't believe were forgivable. And I suddenly heard a voice say to me, I forgave you for these things years ago.
Mm.
So I was really overcome, and tears were coming down this face. And I said, well, I was walking in early morning darkness at 5 a.m. and I turned onto this street called High Street. And I said, but Lord, I don't know how to go on. I don't know. I can't hold a job. I have difficulties with relationships. I'm not financially stable. And in the darkness of early morning light, I saw a spiritual hand reach down to me, composed of bright white light. And I heard God say to me, come with me, I'll show you how to live again.
Mm.
And on that day, I stopped ingesting prescription meds that I had been prescribed for 2 years, and I haven't ever been on them since.
Boy, you're
So
not
without God, I would not, without God, I would not, I wouldn't be here.
Mhm.
I know I wouldn't have been able to overcome that. And I wouldn't be able to be at peace the way I am now, and to bear with the times when times become difficult again. They become on a regular basis. They become difficult again. So, but I just, I, as miserably as I do trust in God, and it enables me to, to bear with it, to bear with to bear with the discouragement, to bear with the disillusionment, and just put one foot in front of the other, and be at peace.
Yeah, and a lot of times that requires us to be discerning of the from the outside world, discerning of those we surround ourselves with, because they can have either a beneficial or rather malevolent effect on our own psyche, on our own, what I like to call glasses half full versus glasses half empty, philosophical bent, if you will. I consider glasses half full, although I question what's the glass full of. That's what I want to know. I mean, little Irish cream, I'll take that, my favorite
Well,
beverage.
I think it's important to, it's important to set limits with people, no matter
Mhm.
how, and it's also important to be, I disagree with the notion that there are toxic people. I find that offensive to say
Mhm.
about a person, because people who are, we are, a person might turn, they're sick, they're ill, they are, they are in deserving of your prayer, and if and it may be difficult to be around them, and that's perfectly accepted. But you can, what really holds a relationship together, whether the relationship is going well or struggling, is goodwill. That's
Mhm.
really, people say, oh, it's all about how compatible you are, how much time you spend together. This is what the
Mhm.
world tells you all the time. It's
Mhm.
not.
Yeah.
Does that influence it? Yes, but does it control it? No, it doesn't. And if you can be ex experience goodwill toward another person, um, no matter what the circumstances are, again, it's not about circumstances. It includes, if you can experience peace and goodwill toward a person, what the circumstances of relationship that you share are, you will be able to, that relationship will persevere.
Merrie Reagan is my guest. Her book, her memoir is Life Flashes, a Memoir, which invites you, the reader, to re-examine divine existence and at the same time to reassess numerous aspects of life, both past and current. This book is available through Amazon as well, and will also be linked to her website, Merrie H. Reagan. That's MERRIEHREAGAN.com. Again, we'll be linked to that website. And we are talking with her here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and it is a pleasure to have Merrie Reagan on the program. One of the aspects of what we want to talk about on this particular program, because as we said at the front end of the program, it seems like a lot of folks are writing their memoirs. What was your process in just getting started? Because I remember, strangely enough, 22 years ago, when I first started writing my book, which is a small little thing called Choices. I know I've seen a lot of instructional videos and other things online about, okay, here's what you want to do, step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I didn't do any of those. You know what I'm saying? I didn't do any of those. And I'm not sure what went wrong, because I'm still working on the book, still trying to get it squared away. So what was your process in that regard?
Well, let me talk about it process in terms of well, first of all, I didn't intentionally start to do it. I just sat down and started doing, but I think when I think of writing, I think of the characteristics it developed in me, three characteristics that character building characteristics that it has developed within me. One is discipline,
Mm-hmm.
determination, and devotion. Discipline, because as a young person, I thought, oh, discipline, that's just monotonous, routine, overbearing, boring. I don't, I confess that. And then as I've matured, and especially as a writer, I've seen that discipline is a form of love, i.e., setting aside time every day, or, it depends upon the writer. For somebody, it might be every day, somebody it might be every other day. That's between you and you and God, what
Mm-hmm.
you and then accepting responsibility. So setting aside the time to write, and then accepting responsibility for what you were writing. In other words, not becoming overly focused on potential readers or your book subjects or you as an author, remaining detached. That is your responsibility to your audience. And finally, regularly reviewing what you write, because I found a lot of, on a number of occasions, I would write something and say, yeah, that's true. That's good. And I'd look at it 3 weeks later. I say, oh yeah, that's good. Do not put that in the book. It's too, it's too revealing. It's very important. And I think it's very, important that authors be respectful of their audiences and not draw them too deeply into things that are beyond their ability to handle. And I find that people, there are writers who do that on a regular basis, and it's not effective writing.
Okay, let me ask you about that then. How do you make that determination as to what the reader can handle? It almost goes to this whole concept of, for example, the government isn't going to tell us certain things because we can't handle it. Well, who are you to determine what we can and cannot handle, government? So how do you go about making that determination? Because that's a big responsibility in one sense.
Well, I don't do it alone. For one thing, I know I can't handle it alone. I ask for prayer. I ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
I ask for divine guidance. And I just think I don't want to disrespect anyone,
Mm-hmm.
period. You may not agree with them. And it doesn't mean because you're setting limits, people think, oh, that you can't talk about difficult things. But you can. It's your responsibility to talk about difficult things. But it's your responsibility as a writer to talk about those things and respect everyone who's involved, regardless of any personal feelings, period. And in doing so, it actually enlightens your audience and it clarifies the issues that you want to discuss, because they're not about you or your feelings about somebody else. It's about, I'll give you an example. One summer, family members came from out of state to visit with one another. And then some came from England, some came from Pennsylvania, some came from Texas, and then all of a sudden, everybody left. No word, no nothing. And at first, I was upset about it. So I didn't go into I didn't go into the details of it, because it wouldn't help the audience anyway. Speculating as to why. I don't know why. How do I know?
Yeah.
But what I did find, it bothered me at first, and then I remembered when I was an adjunct instructor at a community college. I was doing a teaching class on business communication, and I remember this textbook I was using, and it said 93.3% of the meaning of what people say to one another is clarified through non-verbal signals, not words. And if people are questioning the veracity of what a person's saying, they don't rely on words. They rely on non-verbal cues. And I found that fascinating. And so what that said to me is that when people left, it said the relationship's changing, the old way of relating. It wasn't, it probably was not the most healthy way to do things, but what they were saying is that the old way of relating to one another is passing away. It's not working anymore. And people go through these kinds of cycles, whether they're living together or not, on a regular basis. And so that's passing away. So it's important in the meantime to maintain a sense of goodwill with and not, blame. Blaming's just a way of avoiding responsibility, period. Just being respectful. And sometimes the people themselves they don't know. They just know that something's changed. They don't know how to talk about it. They don't know how to, they're not able to process it. They're grieving. They go. Maybe it's not, maybe it's not always a preferable way to handle it, but that's how they do it. So it's important to just respect that the old way is passing away and that a new way is emerging, and that it's important to be kind and respectful and cooperative in the meantime. Make sense?
Yeah, indeed, it does make sense.
Yeah.
A matter of fact, I've often said this about my career in broadcasting. When I started at the age of 19 and started doing interviews shortly thereafter, and have been doing them ever since, that if anybody had really been following my career, my interviews and so forth, and taking notes, by this time, they would probably be able to write my unauthorized biography, because I share about me. Now, the one rule I really work hard to try to adhere to is I don't share about someone else's experience that I may have been in the presence of, because that isn't my story. That's theirs. And so I tried only to relate what I have experienced in my life. I'm curious as to the, shall we call it, the vetting process. I love these different words for this. Vetting, parsing. Well, I love just the language and the words that are available. But what was that process for you in terms of saying, no, I won't tell them about this, but I will tell them about that? And I ask this question in light of our current social media, where people are out and about and they take snapshots of, like I really care, their food that they're eating. I don't care what you're eating. Plus the fact you probably took a horrible picture that gives the restaurant that you're at a horrible reputation because you don't know how to take pictures of food. Now, that's a sidebar thing. But that seems to me also to be a challenge as well, because my perspective, and again, this is the reason why I've shared so much about myself on my program, on these programs, God already knows. So what difference does it make if 8 billion other people know? Most of them don't care. They're too busy just living their lives. How did you how did you do that? How did you decide this is in, this is out?
Well, again, mostly I did what I felt led to do. I mean, a lot of the experiences I had, I didn't think I'd end up being at the JFK library a number of times and meeting people such as, former First Lady Rosalind Carter and, former President Barack, I didn't meet him there, but former President Barack Obama, people who, people that I wouldn't meet, whose lives are very different, but yet very similar. It was just a fascinating experience to be able to go there.
Mhm.
And Charles Gibson, who was he was a longtime anchor for ABC, and he was at the desk on the morning of September 11th. He was reporting, and all of a sudden, they received this video in that, that there was something going on at the World Trade Center. They're looking at it off air, and the producers are frantically running around trying to verify that the video's good to, the good, adequate. And they verified, and then all of a sudden they say to Charlie Gibson and Diane Sawyer, "You're on the air." And they've just seen these planes barreling into the twins. I think it was just the first one when they first came on.
Mhm.
And I can't imagine what that experience must have been like for them, to be sitting at that and then seeing it, and all of a sudden you're on the air in front of millions of people. And Charlie said that for weeks, he said, I mean, I don't know why, it kind of still makes me a little cheery. He said for weeks after that, when he was on or off the air, he found himself becoming tearful, because he remembered the facial expressions of people that he talked with, and, um, events of the day. And all the work that I remember, was fascinating listening to Rosalind. I know the late Rosalind Carter, when she came to the JFK Library, talked about all the work that she did to help people with mental illness. When I was growing up in the 60s, I mean, so many things were going on then. There was TV was new.
Mm.
TV was only like 8 years old. Around the time that President Kennedy was assassinated, we had the space race going on. The United States was in the space race, and John Glenn had just gone around the world 3 times, and
Yeah.
then 1962, and then they had the Apollo 11 in 1969, men landing on the moon, and and so, and then also in the 60s, as far as, people didn't talk about, mental illnesses. People didn't talk about that. That was not accepted as polite conversation.
Right.
And the thought of people recovering from mental illness was, serious, like schizophrenia. That was not, you didn't even mention that. And all these years later, she came to talk about how all the, work that she did she saw patients living in deplorable conditions in state hospitals. They were overcrowded. You'd have 12,000 patients in a hospital that was designed for 3,000 people over medicated, and patients weren't able to be involved in decisions for their care for the most part. And she was instrumental with many other people in changing that, and the deinstitutionalization of hospitals, getting people who are able to be in, day programs, not being hospitalized or being in residential homes, so that they would not, to encourage their well-being. So that a lot of things. And then also I worked with a psychologist for 10 years, and when he started out, he was working with people who were schizophrenic. And two of the people that he worked with recovered fully. I was like, what? I said, oh, how did that happen? I said, well, first of all, can you explain to me what schizophrenia is? Because I think a lot of the terms they use, when somebody says, oh, she's schizophrenic, it doesn't really welcome a person to talk with that person. It's some of the terms are used. But anyway, he said, usually, very simply stated, a person who's schizophrenic is somebody who's experienced a very traumatic life event and they can't handle it. So they invent a person that they want to be instead of that enables them to escape, dealing with. And I said, well, how did you, because psychologists can't, they don't use medication. They're not allowed to.
Right.
And so I said, well, how are these people healed? He said, I believe that they were healed because over time they simply felt that they were heard, and they began to trust and move forward. And because they trusted God, trusted life, they were healed and they moved forward.
Now, your memoir spans basically about 14 years into 2021, which was, I don't want to say it was the halfway point necessarily, but we were into the pandemic. And this is dovetailing off of what you've just stated about mental health and wellness, that many of the conversations I've had on this program having to do with this issue have been that one of the pluses, again, all depends upon your perspective, but one of the pluses of this pandemic has been the fact that we are now talking about mental health and mental health and wellness. And and the stigma, I do honestly believe, is beginning to be broken down, if you will, because we're having these conversations. I mean, I even joke about this, but I say, okay, everybody who is in therapy, raise your hand. Well, my hand goes up because this program for me is therapy, but I also have developed a network of people. Your observations, your thoughts in that regard, because obviously there has to come a point when we start talking about the things that we have chosen not to talk about. Eventually something comes along to almost force us to have the conversations.
Well, I think what happened to me was, when I was very ill, I realized my life was very much defined in terms of what I was always thinking about what the world, a good job, be in a relationship, be financially stable, all those things. So that was in the front burner of my mind. And therefore, that's largely why I was ill. There wasn't anything wrong with me, except that my priorities were but in my ill mind, they were perfectly normal and natural. And yet I was very ill. So, and then when I began to reestablish a relationship with God, which wasn't really ever broken, I just didn't see it. Then when you put a God on the front burner, then you start living through a sense of passion, not expectation. Once your life becomes about proving I can be in a relationship, proving I can be this financially stable, proving I can be this much of a hermit, proving, et cetera, then you're going down the slippery slope. Then you're on the way to illness, because it's not about that. And so when life's about just enjoying, and there are times too when I slip back into it. I think life's going to be better when, No, it isn't. It's when life is, life is what it is. And it's important for you to be able to enjoy it where you are. And even when it's difficult to persevere. And once I start getting into that life is better when, I start feeling even more ill than I did before. It's not. It's enjoying each day. It's enjoying each day. It's enjoying being alive, being able to, I mean, and we all see people around us every day, and I look at them and I say, oh my gosh, I could not be you for 5 minutes. Your life is so much, and it's not to say that what you're experiencing isn't difficult, but what it does say is that, put things into perspective.
I know
So,
perspective makes a big difference, and I know that I'm not a fan of the concept of misery loves company, and you got to find other people that you can kind of commiserate with in your own misery. No, that doesn't help. My mother, for example, I called her to share with her some stuff that was going on,
yeah.
and she stopped me mid-sentence. She says, "I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. Now, if you want to
Mhm.
call me and talk to me about stuff that's going on, this, that, the other thing, you want advice, you want inspiration, you want some guidance, feel free to call. But I don't want to hear the negative stuff." And I was taken aback for an instant, and then I realized, oh, she's right. I don't need to do that to her or anybody else, especially considering the fact she's still dealing with the loss of her husband. Um, so the next
I
time
thought,
I,
do you bring it to one of the things that that helps me too when I talk to people. First of all, I bring it to God to help me figure out because even if you're talking with no matter who, there's a limit. And so and then also when I'm talking with that person, I just say, you're welcome to talk. Don't vent. That's disrespectful.
mm,
So that helps me because you're just dumping it on a person, and it's kind of a form of anger, and
yeah,
it's not productive. It's
hmm,
not productive, and they're not responsible for your situation, you know.
right, right.
So they're there to help you process it.
Well, when I do using the word vent, when I have a dear friend, and he says, "Hey, let's get together for coffee. Get you out of the station, get away from that environment for even if it's just for a half hour, and we can chat and so forth." I am the kind of person who takes responsibility for his life. I am where I am because of all of the choices that I have made. No, I am not a victim. I played that for a short time when I was just out of high school, and I was blaming the state, specifically of Arizona, where I was born and raised, for labeling me. They labeled me legally blind. All right, I didn't choose that, you know. And after a while, I began to realize, what difference does it make what they may or may not have done? What am I doing?
Right.
What difference am I making in my own life? What choices? And that's what that's where this program is sort of spun out from, is the fact that we want to offer people choices and knowledge of those choices, meaning that there are choices you don't even know about. Folks that Mary Reagan has shared with us that you didn't know even existed. I often look at it that way and go, okay, I've been to the Cheesecake Factory. I have seen their menu. Okay, that is an abundance of choices, maybe an overabundance of choices. Okay, fine. But, um, pare it down. Uh, if you need to make a decision about something, do some research, do some investigating, go within and listen to the still small voice, whatever it is that you feel that you should do, to know that there are other ways of doing things that maybe you haven't even heard of. Go to the library and read some books. That's the beautiful thing about reading so many
Yeah.
different books. You
I
are
think it's
also a
important.
voracious reader, if I'm not mistaken, and that, I'm sure, enlightens you as well.
Well, I wouldn't say I enjoy reading. I wouldn't say I'm a voracious reader, but I'm finding now late in life, I think it's important to balance, time you spend being inward and alone with community, with people in community. I started recently going to church services again on a regular basis, and I have been in and out of church all through life. And what I'm finding is that I've been so um, defensive, I think, about faith matters,
Hmm.
and maybe a little angry, maybe, I don't know, fear of commitment, that I've been pushing the church away instead of and lately I've been going regularly, and I said, you've been so angry and defensive, you don't see all the good stuff that's here. And I just, I don't want to, a lot of times I find, because I think too much, thinking isn't always a good thing. It's not always a good thing. I just been a pleasure to go to church and just sit and be still. What is
Hmm.
that from the Bible? Be still and know that I'm God, and
Exactly.
not have an agenda. And that's
Mhm.
helping me to um, process and to, I enjoy all kinds of things. I'm a ballroom dance student. I've been a serious ballroom dance student for 7 years. And it's really, taught me so much about balance, about posture, dancing, social skills, coordination, eating habits. I enjoy house cleaning. I enjoy working in the yard. I enjoy going to movies. Um, but I think it's also really good to, going back to the original point, that it's really important to balance alone time with being in community with people. Because it gets, again, it's personal perspective is good. It's only it's only a piece of the pie.
Oh,
So
absolutely. Yeah.
they're both, I mean, too much community isn't healthy, too much being alone isn't. So balancing both is really important.
Life Flashes, a memoir. Merrie Reagan, my guest, and you are listening to Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and this is really a very fascinating conversation we're having. From my perspective, I'd like to think that you folks are enjoying it as well. I'm curious about your upbringing philosophically. I mean, I was born and raised a Roman Catholic. I had also the great pleasure after my with my first wife, my first marriage, of being introduced to the Eastern Rite of the Catholic Church, still under the Pope, Byzantine Rite of the Catholic Church. It was, and you talk about seeing the good things. I love, still do, even though I may not be a practicing Catholic anymore. I love the ritual and the ceremony and the traditions. They can be so beautiful and meaningful, especially as we're conversing here around this time of the year with the various holy days and high holy days and so forth. But I'm also intrigued by Judaism in terms of the holidays. Of course, I also found out that Hanukkah was not a major holiday or holy day, if you will, or period in the Jewish calendar. But nonetheless, I have a great deal of reverence for Judaism, and I'm wanting to learn about all of the different philosophies. What about your upbringing?
Yeah, I was brought up Roman. I was brought up Catholic, and I had recently had a conversation with someone, and I was talking about how I don't go to one church. I go to this church for this thing, and this church for that thing, and this. She's, oh, okay. So now I understand that. Yeah, there are people that we call Roman Catholics, but you're what we call a Roman Catholic. So I think that's what you are. I said, I think that's it. But I mean, oh God, talk about changes when we were growing up, and you'll remember this too. I mean, I remember going to church on Easter Sunday and kissing the cardinal's ring. It was Easter Sunday, so it's a high mass. They have incense. Cardinal Cushing of Boston is processing toward the back of the room. He extends his hand toward me with a ring, and you kissed it. And I remember later, I remember that was like one of the first times I understood what holy fear was. I mean,
Mm,
he radiated joy. And I remember feeling intensely uncertain and yet feeling no fear that I would be harmed at all.
Yeah.
And so you go from, that I mean, there's so many more changes that but that was that. And then a year later, the Supreme Court says no more prayer in school. I won't get into that, but that's like, I don't know how that happened and why that happened. I know why it happened, but that was profoundly changing to our society.
Yeah.
Profoundly, and still
Indeed.
is to this day.
Yeah.
And then, so later on you had there was a clerical, it's still painful to, as a Catholic, no matter, I'm not like super religious Catholic, but I mean, I love the Catholic Church and it's still painful to me, but I also know that I remember listening to a priest say, why do he knew fellow priests that were involved, and he was heartbroken and he wanted to leave the church, and he just said, and somebody asked him, well, why didn't you? And he said, because I realized God is much bigger than this.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why, and I thought that was a beautiful, beautiful answer. And we've seen, changes, women are now being considered to be, deacons. There's a papal commission doing that. I hope that at some point I think there are actually Catholic priests who are married. They are converts. There's only about 125.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's more of an issue of people, doing what they believe they're called to do, whether you're married or not, whether you're male, or, I mean, I interviewed a guy in the book he was in the army in 1990, and he was an officer in the army, and he was served in Desert Storm. And then 2016, he had married. He and the wife were about to have their first child. She had changed jobs. Her income level potential was 2 or 3 times his. They decided he would be the stay-at-home dad. So he, 17 years later, he's still the stay-at-home dad. He loves it.
Mm-hmm.
So people, I mean, in the 60s, if a man was staying home with their kids, they'd be like, what's going on there?
Something's wrong.
Change. Right. And so, but it's just interesting to see the conversation evolve. Even this new Pope, I just read the other day that Pope Francis has decided to bless same-sex couples.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he's 100% that he's not saying that it's marriage. He's blessing the union,
Mm-hmm.
which is a beautiful union.
Yeah.
If that's what's intended to be. Just as people who are companionships, why don't we bless companionship? Why don't we bless friendship? And when they say same sex, I mean, usually what they mean, I think the word gay is a misnomer. Usually what they mean, actually the word gay means happy,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yeah.
and it's a misnomer, because usually what people are talking about when they mean gay is that there are 2 people that are the same sex or of the opposite sex, who are not biologically related, who are in love, their family, their soul brother and soul sister.
Yeah.
But that notion, which is thousands of years old, has been so pushed down. People say, you say soul brother, soul sister, they say, what? What is that?
Yeah.
But that's what it is. That's
Mm-hmm.
universally true. And I would, I mean, when they become soul brothers and soul sisters, they become part of the human family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Using all these other words to isolate them as victims, it's not true. It's not healthy. It doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help the people. It doesn't help anybody around.
I had the privilege of meeting and actually knowing a priest in the Byzantine Rite. He was Father John. I can't recall his last name. And he was at that time, and this was back in the 80s, early 80s, around the time that I married my first wife. And he was the last priest to be allowed to marry when, instead of saying, when the Western Rite priests asked, "Hey, why don't you let us marry like the people, like the priests in the Eastern Rite of the church?" Rather than saying, "Okay, sure, why not?" They took away the right from the Eastern Rite of the Catholic Church, which again was still under the Pope. It's probably considered Orthodox, but it is still under the papacy. And I have often thought that if they had allowed priests in the Western Rite of the Church to marry, then we don't need to go down this road, but I'm just saying, I don't think we would have had the decades that we've had of what everybody is very much aware of has happened with
Right.
the
Right.
priests in that regard. If they had,
I
and
think,
it's,
well, I don't know about that, but what I would venture to say it did influence, it has influenced it.
yeah, yeah,
But what I do know is that whenever you say to a person, you're not, you are not allowed to be married, you don't allow them to make that choice.
hmm
It creates an emotional environment of secrecy,
hmm
shame, and
hmm
guilt. A
hmm
lot of people who in their 20s don't know, then they don't know that they want to be married. They
yeah,
have no idea. They have no idea.
yeah,
And then there are a lot of people that are in their 30s or 40s that, don't know, they don't want to, marriage isn't for them.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's really not about and that's really primarily, um, I was taught to be faithful to single life values, when, no matter what, whether or not I eventually marry. And I confess I was rebellious of that when I was in younger years. And but I saw that it wasn't a punishment, that it was something that was a good thing.
hmm
But I'm faithful to those values each and every day, not because somebody says I have to be, because I choose it.
yeah,
I choose it. If I
yeah,
want to be married, I can be married, but no institution is going to say to me, again, I just think it creates a very unhealthy environment, just it's a certain way of, it comes across as they want, they just a certain way they want religion to look.
yeah,
They
yeah.
don't want it to look, they don't want it to look, and I don't agree with that. I think I includes the people that are already there, but I don't think, um, I think it's meant to include everybody,
Absolutely.
the,
And I myself, I'm in my second marriage. It will be my last, only because I basically, after my first divorce, which wasn't really a wonderful time. It never really is. I made the commitment saying, okay, the next relationship I get in, I am going to do everything in my power to keep it together. And there have been times when it's been quite a challenge, but I'm still there. My wife is still there, and we're still doing what we need to do to support each other and so forth. And I have to give my parents a lot of credit because of the fact that I recognized early on, even in my first marriage, how they were married for almost 62 years at the time of my father's passing this year. I figured, first of all, they had gone through marriage encounter back in the 70s. And they had the experience, even though maybe it was only 20 or 30 years, it didn't matter. They had 20 or 30 years of experience. Why wouldn't I go to them to seek advice on certain issues, you know? And I did. And they were very helpful at the times that I did go to them. And even to this day, in my present relationship with my wife, my mother is just beyond supportive. But one of the things that she taught us all is She does not, and neither did my father. They did not stick their noses in where they weren't asked.
Mhm.
They might internally have their own personal observations, but they never shared them with anybody. And it wasn't like that. It was only if we came to them as the kids, in the family. And they really did respect, our relationships. They supported us in every way that they could. And I think that a lot of folks don't recognize the people around them. You talk about community, and sometimes we don't recognize the support that's right in front of us, right?
I think no kids really, no child really, uh, um, I mean, divorce is not an easy thing for anybody. But in fact, relationships change every day.
Mm-hmm.
There's divorces and deaths and sense and relationships every day. And no child really truly cares whether or not their parents are happily married. What they do care is that their parents love each other. That's all. And that they love them. They
Mm-hmm.
could care less about, you know, whether or not they're physically together.
Yeah,
So, um,
that's
you
that's a
know,
very that's a good point. I think that's a very valid point. And I would have to
and
say,
I
looking,
wasn't really ready to
yeah.
say that until after, because I was influenced heavily by upbringing to say that until after my parents died.
Mm. Well, I feel very fortunate that I didn't. I often say that it's my
I
my
know that they love one another, and I
yeah,
know that they love us. That's all
yeah,
that matters to
yeah.
me. And
I
I
didn't.
know they loved other people. Duh. We all love other people.
Yeah,
You know, this idea that there's just the one and then nobody else ever matters as much is just not true.
yeah,
We love
yeah.
all kinds of people for all kinds of reasons. That's what Jesus would have wanted us to do.
Exactly, exactly. You are also two elements here I want to touch on before we conclude our conversation here. Number one, you are, as I and my wife have been for many years, animal lovers. We have
Oh,
currently a big black king shepherd named Angus. We've got 7 chickens and 2 female cats that roam the house.
oh,
And
wow.
we absolutely love them all. We did at one point have 9 cats. They were all indoor cats too, by the way.
Oh,
And,
Jesus.
yeah. And
He was Mary and Joseph. I haven't said that in years.
well, and at one time we actually had 3 dogs at the same time. When we first moved here to Santa Barbara, we had 3 dogs. Um, but you also have a dog. If I'm correct in the pronunciation, Jura is the dog's name?
Yeah, he was born in Scotland. One of my nephews, when he was a Labrador, so he was a wanderer,
Oh.
and he, often go off. And my nephew he's of Scottish descent too, and he'd say, "Jura, Jura, where are you?" He was a
Well,
lab. He was a one. Well, they're not all the same.
no,
Yeah, Jura's passed away. He's
yeah. But
passed
he was
away.
rather influential in not just your
Oh,
life, but also in the book that you have presented to us
yeah.
that we're talking about here on the program today, called Life Flashes, a Memoir. Tell us about Jura's impact.
He taught me about the acceptance of uncertainty, about quiet confidence, and about humility in a way that I won't ever know love the way he showed it to me again. Um, from a animal perspective. Um, and he could be mischievous too. He could be, but in all the years we were, he gave him care for 10 years, and all those years, not ever did I ever see him do a mean, nasty, greedy, selfish thing ever. That's the truth. That's truth. That's not, I didn't make it up. It's truth. And yet there were times when he could be full of holy mischief. I'd be coming home from I'd be coming home from the grocery store, and I'd be unloading the SUV, the mini SUV with grocery bags, and I'd have a couple in my arm, and he'd jump out of the car and he'd be like, "Oh, sorry, I'm going on. I'm going to run off into the yard. I'm going." Yeah. And he'd have a smile on his face. You knew
Yeah.
you knew he was being naughty. But
Yeah.
he would come back. He gave me so much. I mean, I didn't intend to adopt him either. He was a brother's dog, and then the brother and family, and they had just moved here from England, and I said, look, I'm not working. They had one child, but by the time they moved here, they had 3 children under the age of 5, and he travels a lot with business. So I said, well, if you want, I'll walk him every day. I'm not working. So I said, okay, and they said, oh, that would be good. So we started walking together, and a year later, they decided to move into Boston because they wanted to be close to the schools, the preschools their kids were going to.
Mm-hmm.
So they said, well, listen, why don't we, he can be with Jura, can be with you during the week, and then he'll come back to us on the weekend. I said, okay. I had never lived with anybody, had anybody in the house with me since I don't know, I left home like, I don't know, 30s.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, what's this going to be like? But after he was there one day, I just felt so free being around him. And he loved to walk, though. If you didn't, we walked like 4 or 5 hours a day.
Oh, wow.
That was what he was used to. And if you didn't go, he'd go. He would find a way to go out of the house, and he'd be like, I'm going,
Yeah.
And he was a kind of person. He was a kind of person. He was the kind of dog that, for example, if I had a friend, or I remember a friend coming over, and we were talking on the love seat couch, and he was laying on a rug in front of us, and he's looking at me like, and so he wants to come up, and he's starting to feel a little possessive of me, holy possession, I would say. And he wants to come up on the couch in between us.
Yeah.
And I say, okay, meanwhile, then, maybe a few months later, I go to bring him to the laundromat, and there's this young girl there, and within 5 minutes, he's in her lap.
Mm.
I say, that's cool. By the time I leave here, he's coming home with me.
Oh, I love it. Well,
Yeah.
I know that a lot of folks also, when they have animals, they and I know that we've done this with ours. They tend to treat them like their children. But you, in addition to your dog, you also have worked with a lot of children over your life, and I'm curious as to the relationships that you've developed in that regard, and how you worked with these kids.
Well, I haven't worked with kids for a while. I have, as far as motherhood goes, I've had a chance to, when I was an elementary education tutor, I had moments, there's been moments for me to exercise motherly inclinations toward the children I taught, toward nieces and nephews. I was not called to be a biological mother.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me a long time because for years I thought, well, even if you're not married, you should be with kids somewhere. You're not really a woman if you're not, you don't have kids
Yeah.
somewhere. And I'm not really exactly sure where that came. Some of it was probably societal, some of it's probably just in my head. And then I just, after decades, I let it go.
Mm.
I love children. I hope to someday meet someone with children. Of course, they're going to be all grown up.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love, I enjoy talking with I don't talk with my nieces and nephews often now because they're all in different parts of the country, but I find it fascinating to talk with young people about their perspective um, about life, and to see that we're all, that to close the gap between the ages, so to speak, when you talk with a young person, that, age doesn't, there's still, we have there's much that we can share and learn from each other.
I found it interesting, a survey that just came out. It had to do with the holidays, and that the typical holiday party, if you will, office party,
Yeah.
for young people, they would like to have basically an afternoon party, but more importantly, they don't care about the alcohol. Whereas folks who are much older at those holiday parties they want the alcohol. And it's interesting how those kinds of things have changed in terms of what's important to the younger set. I know there have also been a lot of criticisms of the generations below us, you and I, in terms of whether they care or not about this, that, or the other thing. And it's like, well, yeah, but they have to find themselves just like we did, you know?
Yeah, they're really not that much different. I went
No,
to
not
a,
really.
no, they're not.
Yeah.
But it's a societal thing that, I mean, I never understood this, labeling Generation X and Generation this and
Yeah.
Generation. It makes no sense to me at all. But I just went to a wedding about a couple of months ago, a family wedding, and they decided to bring in an Elvis impersonator to their wedding. Well, I had never seen that. It was hilarious. I mean, I think it might have been somebody that that they knew.
Yeah.
He wasn't like a super professional, but he was funny. He could sing.
Hmm.
And it was just, I was like, oh, this is cool. At first
Yeah.
I was like, what the heck? This is a wedding. And then it was so funny. It was like everybody was into it.
Oh, that's hilarious.
In my 80-year-old, I'm sorry, 89, in my 90s-year-old uncle was, we had times when we were dance, we were all in a big circle and people would step into the circle and dance. And my 92-year-old uncle was dancing. It was
Mm.
amazing,
Yeah.
amazing. Talk about bridging the gap, and still, has lost his wife of many years, a few years ago, and
Yeah.
he can still smile, he can still laugh, just like he always did.
Yeah. Well, I have to say that my mother, she's 89 this year. And as I
Yeah.
said, still grieving, I'm sure, over the loss of her husband, my father, who is not just
How
a
long
father,
ago?
March 1st of this year.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
it's, yeah.
He was not just a father, he was a grandfather and a great grandfather. And
Well,
she,
he said to me, my uncle, just to
sure.
comfort,
Hmm.
as I mean, I remember when when it first happened. I mean, of course, he still loves her, but I remember when he first said it. He said, "1 minute you feel like, okay, I can deal with this, and the next minute you're." I said that, and I felt that way too. When both my parents are gone too.
Mm,
1 minute but in some ways, I feel as though you don't know how.
yeah.
But through the years, you get used to the physical loss. I don't know how you do that, but you do. And in some ways, I feel as though both relationships are increasingly healthy because they're not in pain anymore.
Well, there's that, and I can now talk to
You
my
know?
father anytime I want.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
don't have to
yeah.
pick up the phone and dial him. Um,
Right,
I want to,
right.
yeah, I want to ask you real quickly
Yeah.
about some advice, if you can give to those listening, in regards to, or tips, if you will, in regards to helping to overcome a lot of the self-talk, the defeating self-talk that obviously it's going on all the time. It's part of what is referred to these days, or has been referred to in many the last few decades, as the monkey mind, that just we want to succeed, but there's something inside of us that for some reason is not really on our side sometimes. How do we overcome that? What are some of the things you might offer?
Well, I think again, putting, trusting God even when when you don't understand. I'm finding age is helping me with that. I don't have to understand things. I don't have to like them. I remember saying that. It's saying to God, well, I do love you, but I really don't like what's going on. God says, that's cool. All I ask is that you trust me.
Yeah.
So, and I would just say, I remember another time, saying, God saying to me in prayer, you're not bitter about these circumstances. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? I said, this happened, this person betrayed me, this happened. And he says, you're not bitter about these circumstances. So then I begin to cry. And I said, well, if I'm not bitter about these circumstances, what am I bitter about? And he says, you're bitter because you don't trust that I love you, that I'm with you, and I'm going to move you through. I can help you go through this and anything. So I think of that. I also think of, I had dinner with a neighbor the other day, and her aunt is 92, and she also just lost her husband of 46 years. And our aunt said to her, he has repeatedly 90-year-old, 2-year-old aunt has said to her, no matter what happens to you, cry a little bit, tears of joy, tears of sadness, and then laugh, 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 laugh.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. And that, it's just, if you're always looking to, if you're always looking to it's be better when, you're not ever going to be content. Happiness is fleeting. I bought a car, I'm seeing someone new, I got a new job. Contentment is something that only faith can teach you. And contentment, the thing about contentment, you can feel it no matter what any circumstances, no exceptions.
Mm-hmm.
Faith will teach you that.
Yeah.
And you'll laugh too.
Merrie Reagan is my guest. Her book is Life Flashes, a memoir, available certainly at Amazon, but also through her website, which is MerrieHReagan.com, MERRIEHREAGAN.com. We will be linked to that website as well. And you are listening to Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host here on the program. We're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. Giving you all kinds of choices today, if you will, different ideas, different concepts through Merrie Reagan's book, Life Flashes, a memoir. And I want to thank you so much for giving us this time here on the program to share your story and your memoir with our listeners. And I certainly encourage folks to pick up a copy. And I look forward to having an opportunity down the road to talk with you further, because I venture, I don't know that you'd necessarily call it volume 2, but I venture there's going to be more to come.
No, this is
No?
it.
Okay.
This is it. But this is the book that just came out is a second edition.
Ah.
So I was with a publisher last year, and then I decided to move to a new publisher this year. And this is we put together the new edition. The formatting is absolutely beautiful. I had it re-edited, and I remember reading it before I submitted it to the publisher, and it reads like spreading smooth, creamy peanut butter.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and because it's in diary form, it's very easy to pick up and put down. First, I think, well, that'll appeal to young people. Now that I'm getting older and my attention spans, it's good for old people too.
Well, thank you so much for sharing it with us.
Oh, you're quite welcome, Richard. Pleasure.
I have 3 more questions to ask you that I ask all of my guests at the end of the program. Before I do that, though, I want to thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. We are giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help, pardon me, cough it up there, giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We're here Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m. and 9 a.m. on Wednesdays, with the December edition of 5 more programs, 8 a.m. Monday through Friday, streaming live at those times at richarddugan.com. podcasts on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and many other locations. And you can watch these interviews on YouTube. We have the channels there. Tell Me Your Story, Richard Dugan. We hope that you will watch, subscribe, and click notification. And we also ask if you can support the work we're doing financially. We'd be ever so grateful. We thank those who have helped and those who will. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And we also ask that you take time during the decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, to spend some time going within and listening to that still small voice, as we talk about on pretty much every single program. With all of that being said, we ask the 3 questions to our special guests on this program. The first of which is, who is Merrie Reagan?
Who am I? I'm a former educator, small business owner, part-time freelance, former part-time freelance writer, and first-time author. I live in Massachusetts, the South Shore of Massachusetts. So I've lived here since I was 5 years old, and I love being near the ocean.
You and me both. You and me both. Second question. What gets you out of bed in the morning?
What gets me out of bed in the morning? Well, lately, if I don't know. I don't know sometimes. I mean, lately, usually it's prayer, or just lately I've been finding it difficult to come out of bed without going to church, being with people, in community in some way. This is a new thing for me. I've kind of been in and out of church all through life. So, but I find it, I find it if I don't do that, it influences me in a negative way. I can skip a day or so, but I don't know, that sense of not being, I think it's being with other people, with whom you have something in common, sharing faith. Dance is another thing. I mean, that helps me get out of bed for the similar reasons. So I guess.
And finally, what was your best day?
No such thing. Every day is every day is the best day. Every day that you're, every day that you're, every day is a good, there's very, as you go through the years, there's success and failure feel very similar. They're not the same. I'm not saying that, but they're all very similar. So when you embrace them as such, you don't experience these highs and lows of mood that you did in the past. It's just as gratifying to persevere through challenges as it is to persevere through successes that change your life in ways that are challenging. So,
once again, I really do appreciate your time. Thank you so much for sharing with us here on the program.
You're welcome, Richard. Good wishes to you.
And I thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. Until our next broadcast, podcast, video cast, love to Lol. Jeanette, I'm still listening. Dad, continue to be happy because I am. Smokey, I will see you on the other side. And to my dear friend Zorro, aho, aho.